In 1889, a Kansas rancher lost power, running water, and his nearest neighbor in a single blizzard. He was fine, ate well, stayed warm, had clean water for 3 weeks straight because he already knew how to live without any of it. When the grid goes down today, most Americans are in serious trouble within 48 hours. These 25 tricks kept your great-great-grandparents alive when the nearest town was 4 days by horse, and utility companies, grocery chains, and appliance makers spent the last century making sure you never learned a single one. What you're about to learn, you can't find in a history class. This is survival. Number 25, banking the fire. Before cheap matches reached the frontier in the 1870s, every homestead kept a fire alive around the clock because letting it go out was not an inconvenience. It was a crisis. Starting one from nothing took 20 minutes of skilled flint work in the right conditions. So at bedtime, your great-great-grandmother raked the hot coals into a tight center pile and covered them with 2 inches of fine ash from the same firebox. No oxygen could reach the coals directly. No fuel burned away. Come morning, she scraped the ash back, laid dry kindling on top, and blew twice. The fire was back in under a minute. Properly banked hardwood coals hold heat for 12 to 14 hours with nothing added. During a winter blackout, when electric heat dies at midnight, a banked fire is the difference between a warm family and a dangerous one. Costs nothing to learn. Takes 1 evening to practice. Number 24, the root cellar. No electricity, no insulation bills, no refrigerator hum, just a hole in a hillside and the most reliable food storage system ever built by ordinary hands. Dig 6 feet down into a north-facing slope, and the earth holds a steady 55 degrees year-round, whether it is July or January outside. Pioneer families packed that space with potatoes, carrots, turnips, apples, and canned goods every October and walked out in March with everything still good. Amish families in Lancaster County have never needed a refrigerator because the root cellar already does it better. When your power goes out and your refrigerator becomes a warm box within 12 hours, a root cellar does not notice the grid went down. It keeps working the way it has for 500 years because the earth does not need a utility company to stay cold. Number 23, the sourdough starter. Every wagon heading west in the 1840s carried a small crock of sourdough starter, wrapped in a wool blanket like it was gold. No yeast packets, no refrigeration, just flour and water, capturing wild yeast from the air, kept alive by a spoonful of flour every few days. A prospector named John Bidwell carried his starter from Missouri to California in 1841, and descendants of that same culture bake with it in Chico today, 185 years from a single jar. When the grid fails, store shelves empty of bread within hours. A sourdough starter on your counter gives you unlimited bread, pancakes, and biscuits as long as you have flour. Klondike prospectors were nicknamed sourdoughs because that starter was the one food that never failed them through an Arctic winter. Living food is more reliable than packaged food. It always has been. Number 22, tallow candles. When the sun dropped behind the prairie in 1860, your choices were pitch darkness or burning animal fat. Pioneer women rendered beef or deer tallow by simmering chopped fat low and slow in a heavy kettle, straining it into tin molds with a cotton wick set down the center. 1 pound of tallow made 8 candles, each burning 4 hours. 32 hours of light from scraps most people today throw away. A frontier household burned 200 candles a year and paid nothing for any of them. Today, a 4-pack of emergency candles disappears from hardware store shelves within the first 6 hours of any storm warning. If you know how to render fat, you will never sit in the dark again. Either beef or deer tallow works when the power company cannot tell you when the lights are coming back on. Number 21, salt-cured jerky. The Comanche and Apache had this figured out long before the first covered wagon rolled west. Lean beef or venison, cut a 1/4 inch thick, rubbed with coarse salt and cracked black pepper, hung on cotton string in a shaded spot with good airflow. 72 hours later, the meat was leather hard and shelf stable for up to 2 years without a freezer, a vacuum sealer, or any equipment a frontier family did not already own. A single mule deer produced 40 pounds of finished jerky, enough to feed a family of 6 for 3 solid months in the field. The science is simple. Salt pulls water out of meat cells through osmosis. Bacteria cannot survive in a low-moisture environment. When the grid fails and your chest freezer starts to thaw, jerky is the only meat in that freezer that does not have to be thrown away. Everything else is on borrowed time. Jerky is already done. If you want to hear about more forgotten Old West survival skills, then hit that subscribe button. Number 20, pemmican. Here is where it gets interesting. Meriwether Lewis called pemmican the most perfect survival food ever devised, and modern food scientists at Michigan State quietly agreed with him. Dry meat, pounded to a coarse powder, mixed with equal parts rendered fat, pressed in dried chokecherries or cranberries, packed into rawhide pouches and sealed with a final pour of fat. The finished product stayed edible for 10 years at room temperature. Roald Amundsen fueled his entire 1911 South Pole expedition on it. 1 pound contained 3,000 calories, 3 days of fuel for a working man in the field. The United States military spent $40 million in the 1950s trying to develop a better field ration than pemmican and never succeeded. The original, with its dead simple ratio of protein and fat and a handful of wild berries, still outperforms anything sealed in a modern MRE pouch. Frontier families did not run out of food because they knew how to make food that did not expire. Number 19, the spring house. If your homestead sat on land with a cold spring, you built a small stone shed directly over it. The water flowed through a shallow trough cut into the floor, holding the whole interior at a steady 50 degrees year-round. Pioneer women set crocks of milk, cream, and butter directly into that flowing channel. Milk stayed fresh for a full week without a drop of ice. Butter held for a month. Farms in rural Virginia still have working spring houses from the 1820s holding food right now. In a long blackout, if you have access to a cold creek or even a shaded spring seep, stacking river stones and setting a sealed container in the current gives you the same effect in under an hour. Zero technology, zero cost. Gravity does all the work. Your great-great-grandmother understood that the land itself was the appliance. You just had to know how to use it. Number 18, Hardtack, a Civil War soldier's diary from 1863 called Hardtack Tooth, Dullars, and Worm Castles. He was not wrong. But that same dense brick kept the Union Army moving across 2,000 miles of campaign. The recipe has not changed in 160 years. 2 cups of flour, half a cup of water, 1 teaspoon of salt. Mix it, roll it a 1/4 inch thick, cut it into 3-inch squares, poke holes through with a fork, and bake at 250 degrees for 4 hours until the interior is bone dry. Stored in a sealed tin, hardtack lasts 25 years. The Smithsonian has original pieces from 1862 still in its collection. Soldiers soaked their pieces in coffee or bean soup before eating. Pioneers crossed the entire continent on this single recipe. When a blackout stretches into days and fresh bread has long since vanished from every shelf within 30 miles, a tin of hardtack feeds your family for pennies per meal. This is the recipe that walked America across itself. Number 17, the flint and steel kit. Before matches became common around 1870, every scout, cowboy, and homesteader carried a small leather pouch with 3 things in it: a piece of hard flint, a curved steel striker, and a tin of char cloth, cotton fabric scorched in a sealed tin until it turned black without burning completely. Strike the steel sharply down the flint edge, and a shower of molten sparks lands on the char cloth, which catches immediately and glows orange without going out in wind the way a match does. Transfer that coal to a nest of dry grass, lift it, and blow steadily from underneath. You have a reliable flame in under 90 seconds in nearly any weather. Army Special Forces survival schools still teach this technique today. A complete flint and steel kit costs about $8. A disposable lighter becomes useless the moment it gets wet or empties or freezes. Frontier families carried knowledge. We carry plastic. In a serious situation, that difference matters enormously. Number 16, willow bark tea. Before aspirin was patented in 1899, every frontier family walked to the nearest creek when someone ran a fever and stripped a piece of inner bark from a white willow tree. Simmered for 20 minutes, strained, and given hot with a spoonful of honey, it worked because willow bark contains salicin, which the body converts directly into salicylic acid. That is the same active compound in aspirin before Bayer figured out how to patent and bottle it. Pioneers used this for fever, headache, joint pain, and muscle aches without a doctor visit or a prescription. White willow trees grow along nearly every creek and river in North America. During a blackout long enough to shutter the pharmacy, knowing which tree in your creek bottom gives you real anti-inflammatory medicine is worth more than the deepest stockpile of ibuprofen you ever tried to build. Your great-great-grandmother did not need a medicine cabinet. She needed to know what was growing outside the back door. Number 15, the hay box cooker. Your great-great-grandmother brought a cast iron pot of beans to a hard rolling boil on the wood stove, then immediately transferred that covered pot into a wooden box packed floor to ceiling with dry hay, old wool blankets, or crumpled newspaper. She sealed the lid and walked away. 8 hours later, she opened the box and supper was fully cooked, piping hot, and ready to eat, without a single additional stick of fuel burned. The insulated box trapped the heat from the initial boil and let it finish the job. The government promoted hay box cooking during both world wars to conserve fuel on the home front. After those wars ended, gas and electric companies had no interest in keeping a fuel-saving technique in public memory, so it quietly disappeared. You can build one today from a cardboard box and the old blankets in your linen closet. It still works exactly the way it did 100 years ago, and during a blackout when you're carefully rationing your propane or firewood, it makes your fuel supply last 3 times longer. Number 14, reading weather from the land. No weather app, no radar, no news radio. Frontier families read tomorrow's conditions from the world around them with enough accuracy to bet their harvests on it. Cattle lying down together in an open field 2 hours before rain. Swallows flying low chased insects that descended in dropping barometric pressure. Rings around the moon measured the altitude of incoming cloud layers. 1 ring meant rain within 24 hours. 2 rings meant 48. Red sky at morning turned out to be grounded in actual atmospheric physics because red morning light indicates moisture-laden air moving in from the west. These were not superstitions. They were centuries of careful daily observation by people who had genuine consequences for getting the weather wrong. A farm family whose harvest depended on accurate prediction developed better pattern recognition than any satellite can model. During a long blackout, when cell service drops and weather alerts stop coming, these skills keep you from being caught outside in dangerous conditions without any warning at all. Number 13, rendering lard at home. One substance did more for the pioneer household than any other single material, and modern Americans threw it in the trash on purpose. A 300-pound hog yielded 30 pounds of pure lard from its leaf fat alone. Simmered low, strained clean, and packed into stoneware crocks sealed with a thin layer of salt, that laird kept for a full year at root cellar temperatures. And it did not just go in the frying pan, it waterproofed leather boots and wagon axles. It preserved salted meat by sealing air out of packed crocks. It made soap, treated cracked skin, healed burns, and fueled oil lamps in a pinch. Procter & Gamble spent $50 million in the 1950s convincing American housewives that Crisco was the modern scientific healthy alternative. A 2017 Harvard nutritional study confirmed that lard contains less saturated fat than butter and is among the more beneficial cooking fats available. The hydrogenated oils that replaced it are what caused the heart disease Laird was blamed for all along. We threw away the right thing and kept the dangerous one. During a blackout, a single crock of lard replaces cooking oil, shortening, lamp fuel, and wound salve all at once. Number 12, smoke-curing meat on the trail. A permanent smokehouse was a luxury that required settled land and good lumber. Families moving west could not always wait for that, so they used the trail cure. Green hardwood chunks, hickory or apple or wild cherry, burned low and slow in a fire no hotter than 120 degrees. A tripod of 3 poles tied at the top, wet burlap draped around the frame to trap smoke inside, and thin strips of venison or beef hung from the top crossbar. 8 to 12 hours later, the meat carried an antimicrobial smoke barrier on every surface and had lost enough internal moisture to make bacterial growth nearly impossible. Trail-cured meat lasted 3 to 4 weeks at room temperature in a dry muslin bag, enough time to cross the Great Plains. Smoke contains phenols and organic acids that are genuinely toxic to surface bacteria. The low heat drives out the moisture bacteria need to survive. Together, those two forces preserve meat the way no plastic bag or vacuum sealer can match when the power has been out for a week. Number 11, making rope from plant fiber. A frontier family that ran out of rope did not send someone to the store. They made it before sundown from whatever was growing along the creek bank. Stinging nettle stems, dried briefly and split lengthwise, produce cordage stronger than cotton rope of the same diameter. Milkweed, dogbane, and the inner bark of basswood trees all yielded durable fiber. The technique is called the reverse twist. Hold 2 bundles of fiber together and roll both away from you between your palms, then wrap one bundle over the other in the opposite direction. The tension locks them together and they will not unravel under load. A skilled fiber worker could gather enough raw material from any creek bottom in an afternoon and produce 20 feet of functional rope before dark. During a blackout that stretches long enough to close hardware stores, knowing which plant in your yard makes cordage is the same as having a supply shelf growing in the ditch. This method predates written history and it still works on every continent on Earth. Number 10, tracking game by sign. A frontier hunter who needed to see the animal before he knew where it was going home, empty-handed. What put meat on the table was reading what the animal left behind. Compressed grass where a deer had bedded told you what direction it left at dawn. A fresh hoof print in soft mud, combined with stride length, gave you the animal's approximate weight and pace. An antler rub on a young sapling told you the buck was working that trail within the last day. Experienced hunters could tell a healthy deer's gait from a wounded one just by track spacing. Fathers taught this to sons starting at age 5 with the same seriousness a schoolteacher taught reading because it was considered basic competence for any adult male on the frontier. In a long grid-down situation where supply chains break and a family needs protein from the land, this knowledge is the difference between a successful hunt and a long, hungry walk through the woods. Number 9, the reflector fire. Jim Bridger described this in his trapping journals from the 1830s, and cold weather survival experts today consider it essential. When your fire burns in the open, most of its heat radiates in all directions, including straight up into the sky where it does you no good. Frontier men in severe cold built a low wall of green logs stacked 2 to 3 feet high on the opposite side of the fire. That wall caught the backward radiating heat and threw it forward, effectively doubling the warmth, reaching the person on the other side. Pair that reflector with a second surface behind you, a canvas tarp, a flat boulder, or leaned up bark, and you are sandwiched between 2 walls of reflected heat from a fire half the size you thought you needed. A properly built reflector fire keeps a person alive at 20 below zero on less wood per hour than an open fire burning in the middle of a campsite. During a winter blackout, when the furnace is cold and the woodpile is shrinking, reflected heat is the difference between comfort and a genuinely dangerous night. Number 8, wool as survival clothing. Cotton kills. That is what cowboys said, and modern hypothermia research proved them right. When cotton gets wet from sweat or rain, it loses all insulating value almost immediately and begins pulling heat away from your body rather than holding it. Wool does the exact opposite. Even soaked completely through, wool fiber retains up to 80% of its warmth because the natural crimp in each fiber traps air regardless of moisture. A man in 1860 wore a wool union suit against his skin, wool trousers over that, a heavy wool shirt, a vest, a long coat, and a wool hat. 6 layers of sheep fiber between himself and a Nebraska blizzard. He could break through creek ice in January, climb out soaking wet, and walk 5 more miles without losing dangerous body heat. Smart Wool in Patagonia rediscovered this in the early 2000s and sell merino base layers for $80 a piece. Your great-great-grandfather had 5 layers in his closet from the annual spring shearing. During a winter blackout, when your electric blanket is dead and your furnace is cold, the clothes you're wearing are your first line of defense. Wool always was the answer. It just stopped being profitable for anyone to tell you that. Number 7, sod house insulation. The treeless Great Plains presented a problem nobody from back east had ever faced. No timber meant no log cabins. So frontier families arriving in Nebraska and Kansas in the 1870s cut thick blocks of prairie sod, stacked them like bricks in overlapping courses, and built walls 3 feet thick. Those walls maintained around 65 degrees in summer without cooling and held near 50 degrees through the worst Dakota blizzard without any heating beyond a small cook stove. Packed earth and densely matted prairie root systems provided an insulation value roughly equivalent to R40, better than most modern American homes today. Willa Cather wrote about Nebraska families surviving -40 temperatures in one-room soddies without frostbite. Your average suburban frame home loses all stored heat within 6 hours of the furnace cutting off. A sod structure holds warmth for 3 full days. Original soddy buildings from the 1880s still stand in Kansas and Nebraska right now, still insulating, still waiting for someone to understand what the builders understood. The earth itself is a perfect insulator. You just have to know enough to use it. Number 6, water by watching wildlife. In arid Nevada and Arizona, finding water separated the wagon trains that made it from the ones that did not. There was no GPS and no topographic map with blue lines. There was the land and the animals that had been finding water on it for 10,000 years. Morning doves fly toward water at sunrise and away from it at sunset, almost without exception. Bees travel in straight lines to and from water, and their range is only 3 miles. So a bee flying purposefully tells you water is close enough to walk to. Converging animal trails almost always lead downhill to a spring or seep. Cottonwood trees and willows will not grow anywhere. Their roots cannot reach permanent water. A single cottonwood standing alone in a dry canyon means a spring within 100 feet of it, nearly every time. During a blackout where municipal pressure has failed and your stored bottles have run out, reading the landscape for water is worth more than anything in a camping supply store. The animals have not forgotten where the water is. They never do. Number 5, the snow cache. A Montana trapper in January shot an 800-pound elk 7 miles from his cabin. He could carry perhaps 100 pounds per trip. So he did what every experienced man in that country already knew to do. He dug a pit in the nearest deep snowbank, packed in the elk quarters, marked the spot with a tall willow stick, and left. Snow holds at exactly 32 degrees, a perfect natural freezer. Wolves could not smell the meat through the insulating snow layer. The trapper returned over the following weeks and moved every pound to his root cellar before the February thaw arrived. The same technique worked for lard, butter, cured fish, and anything that needed to stay frozen through winter. During a blackout, when your chest freezer has been warm for 2 days and everything inside is at risk, moving that food into a packed snowbank buys you days, potentially weeks, of additional safe storage with 0 effort and 0 cost. My grandmother in North Dakota cached Thanksgiving turkeys this way, through every ice storm of her 80 years and never lost one. Number 4, sassafras and cedar tea. Every frontier cabin kept bundles of dried sassafras, root, white cedar tips, and peppermint hanging from the rafters through winter. When cold season hit, mothers brewed a tea from those 3 plants that cleared sinuses, reduced fever, and broke most common colds within 48 hours. Sassafras root contains natural anti-inflammatory compounds. White cedar tips carry roughly 5 times the vitamin C concentration of an orange by weight. Peppermint opens the airways and suppresses cough. Hot 3 times daily at the first sign of illness, this tea addressed the same symptoms a modern $25 cold medicine bottle addresses, from plants growing within walking distance of any frontier homestead. A family that kept these 3 plants dried in their rafters had a medicine cabinet that required no prescription, no store, and no money. During a blackout long enough to close pharmacies and interrupt supply chains, knowing 3 medicinal plants in your immediate area is worth more than any commercial stockpile you can build. Your great-great-grandmother did not need a drugstore. She needed to pay attention to what was growing outside. Number 3, boiling water with hot rocks. Here's the one that outperforms a $1,000 water filter, and uses nothing you cannot find in any natural landscape on Earth, the Shoshone people had been using this technique for thousands of years before any pioneer arrived in the West. And those pioneers learned it fast because they needed it. Line a shallow pit with a freshly stripped animal hide. Fill it with creek water, regardless of how it looks. Drop fist-sized river rocks that have been sitting in a fire for 30 minutes, glowing red, into the water using 2 forked sticks. Within 3 minutes, the water reaches a rolling boil. A rolling boil held for 60 seconds kills every waterborne pathogen that affects humans. The CDC confirms boiling for 60 seconds achieves 99.99% pathogen elimination. A premium filtration system achieves 99.9999%. In an actual survival situation, that difference is medically meaningless. Pioneers drank from muddy cattle ponds using this method and stayed healthy because they understood that heat was the original purification technology. It requires no moving parts, no replaceable cartridges, no batteries, and no warranty. Number 2, navigating by stars and natural signs. A frontier family turned around in 50 miles of unfamiliar wilderness without a compass, had to find their own way out, and they were expected to know how. Celestial navigation was taught to children the same way reading was, as basic literacy assumed for every competent adult. The North Star sits above true north and does not move. The horns of a crescent moon in the northern hemisphere point south. Trees in the northern temperate zone grow heavier moss on their north-facing sides. Ant mounds build on the south-facing sides of trees where the ground warms earliest. Rivers run to lower elevation, and lower elevation almost always means settlement somewhere downstream. Prevailing wind comes from the west across most of the continent, which means wind at your back means you are moving east. A person who carried all of these signs together, combined with knowledge of the regional landscape, could navigate hundreds of miles of open country without any instrument at all. During a blackout long enough to drain phone batteries and take cell towers offline, the sky above you and the ground beneath your feet are the only navigation tools that never run out of power. And number 1, total water independence. Everything else on this list supports this one, because without clean water, nothing else matters for more than 3 days. The frontier families who survived long-term isolation were not lucky. They were deliberate. They collected rainwater from every roof surface into cisterns. They read the landscape for springs and dug shallow hand-dug wells lined with fitted stone and fitted with hand pumps that worked as long as an arm could move. They boiled water with hot rocks when nothing else was available. They read wildlife to find hidden sources. They never assumed water would keep flowing from somewhere else, because on the open frontier, it never did. Water came from what you built, what you maintained, and what you understood about the land under your feet. Modern Americans assume municipal pressure will push clean water through copper pipes indefinitely. That assumption holds right up until it does not, which is exactly when a blackout becomes a genuine emergency. A simple rain barrel installed before an outage gives you hundreds of gallons from a single storm. A hand pump over a shallow dug well gives a family 100 gallons a day with no electricity at all. The knowledge of how to find, collect, and purify water from the landscape around you is the most foundational survival skill ever developed by human beings on this continent. Your great-great-grandfather had it because he had to. And then we all quietly decided to outsource it to infrastructure we do not control and cannot repair. Here is my challenge. Pick one thing from this list and actually do it this week. Not read about it. Not watch someone else do it on a screen. Bank a fire tonight if you have a wood stove. Brew willow, bark tea the next time you have a headache before you reach for the pill bottle. Start a sourdough culture on your counter with nothing but flour and water. Find the cottonwood trees nearest to your house and understand what they are telling you about the water table. Then come back and tell me your great-great-grandparents were just being primitive. My pantry has a crock of lard on the shelf. My counter has a sourdough starter 60 days old. My coat rack has a wool layer that has not come down since October. The next blackout does not scare me the way it used to. because these were not just Old West survival tricks. They were the complete operating system of the most self-reliant people who ever lived on American soil. And oil companies and appliance manufacturers spent a century making sure you forgot every last one. Your great-great-grandmother knew. Now you do too.